The first sound I remember from that morning was not the rooster or the horses moving in the barn. It was the scrape of my father's chair against the kitchen floor, slow and heavy, like he had been sitting there longer than he meant to. The lamp was still burning on the table, though daylight was already coming gray through the east window, and my mother had not yet put the coffee on. That was how I knew something had been decided before I came down the stairs. I was 24 years old then, old enough to think I understood my place in the world, and young enough to believe that if a matter concerned my future, I would be the first to know. I was wrong about that. By the time my father looked up at me and said, "Sit down, Jonas," my wife already knew more than I did. She was not my wife yet. She was a quiet young woman from a family 2 settlements over, a woman I had spoken to only a handful of times in the presence of others. But she knew. And for a long time, that was the part that stayed with me. My name is Jonas. I am an old order Amish husband and father, and I tell these stories because there are parts of our life that look simple from the outside, but carry a weight you do not see until you are the one living under it. If you have ever wondered how much choice there is in an arranged match, or what a man feels when he learns others have been speaking about his future before he has, I hope you will stay with me. And if this story brings a question to your mind, leave it below, because this is one I have carried quietly for many years. I should say plainly first that not every match in our community is arranged in the way outsiders imagine. We are not pieces of furniture moved from one house to another. There is courtship, there are visits, there are long looks across a singing that mean more than words. But there are also families. There are fathers and mothers. There are bishops and ministers watching whether 2 households would fit together. There are debts, farms, temperaments, reputations, and wounds that people do not talk about in public. When I was 24, I had been working with my father on our farm and doing carpentry work in the colder months. We had 42 acres under us then, not all good soil, but enough if a man worked hard and did not waste daylight. I was the oldest son, and that meant something. It meant I hitched the team before breakfast when my father had a bad knee. It meant I spoke little and listened much when men came to discuss a fence line or a tool that had broken. It meant people watched me for signs of steadiness. That winter had been hard. We lost 2 calves in January during a cold spell that put ice along the inside of the barn windows. My father's knee swelled so badly he could barely climb into the buggy. Money was thin. We were not poor in the way some people use that word, because we had food, shelter, work, and people who would come if we called. But there is a kind of thinness in a household that every child feels, even if no one speaks of it. During that time, I noticed men speaking to my father after church. They would stand near the hitching area with their hats low and their hands behind their backs. When I came close, their voices would change. I did not think much of it at first, but then my mother started watching me in a way that made me feel like she was weighing words before they were spoken. She would ask if I had seen a certain family at service, or whether I had noticed how a young woman helped her younger siblings. These were not strange questions by themselves. Together, they made a shape. Her name was Anna. I will not give her family name because some things belong to the people who lived them. She was not loud. She was not the kind of woman young men turned to look at because she made herself noticed. She moved with purpose, and when she smiled, it was small, like she was giving only what was needed. I had seen her at singings. I had passed her a plate at a wedding meal. Once, after a long Sunday service, she held the door while my mother came through with my youngest sister, and I remember thinking she had patient hands. That was all. I had not asked to drive her home. I had not gone to bed thinking I would marry her. Then came that morning with the chair scraping on the floor. My father did not begin with her name. That was his way. He started with the farm. He spoke of the coming spring, of the field along the creek that needed draining, of the tools in the shed that needed repair before planting. He spoke of my brothers growing older and of the responsibility that would come to me whether I felt ready or not. I stood by the stove with my suspenders still loose and my hair not yet combed. My mother set 3 cups on the table, though she had not poured anything into them. At last my father said, "There has been talk." That is a small sentence, but in our world it can carry a whole wagon load. I sat down. He told me that Anna's father had spoken with him after a district meeting, not in a formal way at first, just enough to see whether there might be openness. My father had then spoken with my mother. Her parents had spoken with her. The bishop had been asked whether there was any concern between the families. There was none. In fact, there was approval. Quiet approval, but approval all the same. I remember looking at my mother because I wanted her face to tell me whether this was only an idea or whether the road had already been laid. She did not look away. That may have been the hardest part. She loved me, and she still did not look away. "Does she know?" I asked. My father took a long breath through his nose. "She knows enough." That answer struck me harder than if he had said yes. She knows enough. It meant she had been brought into the circle before me, or at least it felt that way to my young pride. I sat there with my hands flat on the table, feeling the grain of the wood under my fingers. There was a nick near my thumb where one of my brothers had dropped a knife years before. I stared at that mark as if it could explain everything. I asked why nobody had spoken to me sooner. My father's jaw tightened, not from anger exactly, but from the effort of holding his own feelings still. He said a man does not always see what others see around him. He said I had been working hard, but I had also been carrying myself like a man standing alone. He said a household is not built by strength only. It is built by a fit between 2 people, 2 families, and the duties God places before them. At 24, I heard only part of that. I heard that people had judged me. I heard that my father had discussed my future with another father before asking me what I wanted. I heard that Anna had been told enough to think about me while I was still thinking about fence posts and winter feed. I did not hear the care inside it. Not then. The next Sunday, I saw Anna across the yard after service. Snow was melting along the edges of the lane, leaving brown water in the ruts. She wore a dark dress and a black bonnet, and she was helping her mother gather dishes from the back of a buggy. She looked up once. She did not smile. She did not look ashamed. She only met my eyes for a breath and then looked down again. That was the first time I understood that she had been carrying her own weight in this matter too. Later that week, my mother told me Anna had asked a question when her parents spoke with her. She had not asked how much land we had. She had not asked whether I was handsome or whether my work was steady. She had asked, "Is he kind when no one is watching?" My mother said it softly while she was mending a shirt by the window. I had no answer for it. A man can defend himself against many things. He can say he works hard. He can say he keeps the Ordnung. He can say he honors his parents and attends church. But when someone asks if you are kind when no one is watching, there is no quick answer. You have to look back over your life and let the truth stand there. That question changed something in me. I was still uneasy. I still felt passed over in a decision that touched the rest of my life. But I began to see that Anna had not been sitting somewhere with secret power over me. She had been asked to consider a man she barely knew, and the first thing she wanted to know was not what she could gain from him, but what kind of heart he carried when there was no witness. Our first real visit was on a cold evening in March. Her father stayed in the front room for a time, talking with me about cabinet doors and pasture fencing. Then her mother brought coffee, and after a while the older people found reasons to move in and out of the room without leaving us entirely alone. That is how it was done. We sat at a table with a small oil lamp between us. I could hear a clock ticking on the wall. I could hear someone moving a bucket outside near the pump. I did not know what to say. That may surprise some people, because men are often expected to lead in every word. But I was nervous, not because I did not like her, because I understood, sitting across from her, that a life might be forming in that room, and I had not yet decided whether I was ready to step into it. Anna spoke first. She asked if I had been angry. I looked at her then. Her hands were folded around her cup, and she was not looking directly at me. I could have lied and made myself seem more settled than I was. Instead, I told her yes. I said I had been angry that she knew before I did. She nodded, once. Then she said the line I have never forgotten. I knew before you did, but I did not choose before you could. There was no pride in her voice, no apology either, just truth. She had been given the matter early because her father had wanted to know whether she would even consider it before speaking further. She had not agreed to marry me. She had not made a promise behind my back. She had only said she was willing to learn whether there might be a path. That is a very different thing, though my pride had not allowed me to see it. After that, the room felt easier. Not light exactly, but honest. I told her I did not want a wife who felt handed over to me like a duty. She told me she did not want a husband who married because two fathers thought the fields lined up well. We both smiled a little at that, because there was truth in it, and also a small rebellion. Not against our parents, against the idea that obedience must mean sleepwalking. I also learned the secret behind the match, or what I had thought of as a secret. It was not one thing. It was many small things carried quietly by older eyes. Anna's father had seen me repair a broken bench after a wedding meal without being asked. My mother had seen Anna sit beside a widow who was being ignored by younger women. The bishop had remembered that our families had weathered disagreements years before without bitterness. My father had worried that I was becoming too hard on myself after the difficult winter. Anna's mother had said her daughter needed a man who would not make loudness the measure of strength. That was the secret. Not romance arranged in shadows, not a bargain between farms, not a plot to take my choice from me. It was a net of observations made by people who believed marriage was too serious to leave only to the rush of feeling. I do not say that system is perfect. It is not. Parents can mistake control for wisdom. Communities can put pressure where there should be patience. But in our case, the people around us saw something before we did, and then they gave us room to see whether it was true. We married in late autumn. The morning was cold enough that I could see my breath when I went to the barn before daylight. I remember standing there with one hand on the neck of a horse, feeling the warmth of that animal under my palm, and thinking that by evening I would no longer be only a son in my father's house. I would be a husband. A man with someone beside him, and someone trusting him not just with work, but with her days. Marriage did not make me wise at once. No wedding does that. I still had pride. I still had days when I thought silence was the same as patience. Anna learned my faults more fully than anyone else ever had. I learned hers too. We had to learn each other in the plain, ordinary ways. Over burned bread, sick children, late hay, money short at the wrong time, and long winter evenings when neither of us had much left to say. But I came to understand something about that arranged match. The arrangement did not make the marriage. It only opened the gate. We still had to walk through it. Every day after that, we had to choose whether the people who believed in us had been right. Years later, after our third child was born, I asked Anna what she truly thought when her parents first spoke to her about me. She was washing jars at the sink, and the baby was asleep in a basket near the stove. She said she had been afraid I would be stern, not cruel, stern, a man so focused on duty that there would be no softness left in the house. I asked her what changed her mind. She said she saw me carry my little brother from the buggy after he had fallen asleep at a gathering. She said I lifted him carefully so his head would not knock against the wheel. I did not remember doing it. That is why it mattered to her. She had asked if I was kind when no one was watching, and then she had watched in the places where I did not know I was being measured. That humbled me more than praise would have. Much of a man's life is decided in the small actions he does not think anyone will remember. How he speaks when he is tired, whether he frightens people with his mood, whether he treats weakness as a burden or as something placed in his hands for safekeeping. A wife sees those things. Children see them too. God sees them before all of us. The secret behind my arranged match was not that my wife had chosen me before I knew. It was that she had been careful enough not to choose too soon. She knew there was talk. She knew her parents saw a possible future. She knew my family was watching too. But she waited for me to step into the room as a man, not as a name passed between fathers. I am grateful for that now. At the time, it bruised my pride. I thought being told later made me smaller. But sometimes a man is not made smaller by learning that others have seen his life clearly. Sometimes he is invited to become large enough for the responsibility they believe he can carry. If there is one thing I understand now, it is this. A marriage does not begin on the wedding day, and it does not begin when two young people first feel something stir in their hearts. It begins in the truth that surrounds them, the truth of their families, the truth of their character, the truth of what they are willing to learn about themselves before they bind their lives together. For Anna and me, that truth came quietly, through other people's words, through one hard morning at a kitchen table, and through a question that still follows me. Is he kind when no one is watching? I have tried to live as a man who can answer yes. Not perfectly, no husband can say that, but honestly. And if my wife knew something before I did, maybe it was not the future she knew. Maybe it was the question that would shape me into the husband I needed to become. If you value these plain-spoken stories from Amish life, I would be grateful if you subscribed and came back for the next one. And I want to ask you this. Do you think a family should have a voice in choosing a match, or should that choice belong only to the two people involved? I read the comments, and I would like to hear how this story lands with you.